A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 2021 Forbes Women Africa Leading Women Summit, coming to you live from all over the world for our first ever virtual event. I'm Kukuletu Mfupi.
And of course, I'm Fifi Peters, really excited to be here at the 6th Leading Women Summit, and the very first time it is being hosted on the virtual stage, a fitting stage for the current times.
Very fitting, because if one does think about where we were about 12 months ago, Fifi, we had gathered in the sunny city of Durban for this particular summit, and with scores of women in the audience. And just the day before, we had heard about the first official COVID-19 case in South Africa. Just how far we've come.
How could I forget Gugu? And I remember the tension at the time. We were asking ourselves all sorts of questions. Do we go ahead? Do we not go ahead with the conference? Thankfully, we did go ahead with what was a successful conference, if I do say so myself. But again, as you say, how far we have come. You'll remember, Gugu, that of course, that was the introduction of the COVID-19 greeting, as it were, the
Yes.
of the elbow, because we also learned that we couldn't be shaking hands and touching each other too much as a result of the spread of the virus.
Well, of course, we've all adapted to this new environment, and hence the virtual event coming to you today. But this does promise to be a convention and a gathering that is just as insightful as what we've seen in previous years. But maybe we should do exactly that, right? Take a look back and reflect at some of the best of the Forbes Women Africa Leading Women Summit highlights that we've established over the last few years.
If this room were a country, this would be the Africa we dream about, with colossal women leading every sector.
We have an opportunity as women to get more involved.
The power we hold as women is remarkable.
Women should be bold enough to say, I'm building an empire that is going to trade not only in South Africa, but on this continent and globally.
As many African girls can do whatever it is that we choose to do.
Forbes Africa, it's nice to see that we are actually taking more of an initiative on finding out what are Africans doing.
I hope that we can inspire others to reach deep in their pockets and do well as well.
Men of quality are never afraid of gender equality.
Thank you for this inspiration, and I hope it inspires everybody else, because I'm such an easy model to replicate.
As women, we must ensure that Africa focuses on investment in the gross fixed formations that create jobs.
How do you design a world with women in mind and where women are involved? Start by just increasing the efforts to mentor, to promote women within your own companies and your businesses.
Key positions should be held, among others, by women, not because of charity, but because we understand that that is a precondition for the success of building a non-sexist society.
I stand here today, a circumcised woman and a proud African woman.
You are destined for greatness, so live your life intentionally. Wake up with purpose and make the decision that every day is your day.
I was very inspired when I saw young women doing what was thought to be impossible.
We all have the power to influence change, but also the responsibility to see that change kind of follow through and be complete.
Aside from the titles, all of us can have a genuine relationship where we're just looking for each other's best interest at heart.
So we are the power, really. When you have a sister, when you have a brother, when you have someone to reach out to, you are not without power.
You can be anything you want to be, and just motivation and determination to be that person.
African child, your gifts matter. African child, your story matters.
So fear not to chase your dream.
Let us empower each other to change the status quo and level the playing fields.
If you educate one girl in your lifetime, you'll be part of the change needed and not part of a compromise that is expected.
Oh man, what a feeling. Just looking back at the memories that we experienced just over 12 months ago, one can certainly tell that we've had a remarkable few years here at the Leading Women Summit. And not only that, but it's also my pleasure to be a participant year after year in these particular conversations, where we not only look to build on relationships that we forged in the past, but establishing new partnerships. Even in this virtual conference, where we'll be able to move forward and continue to make a difference in terms of the gender parity agenda on the continent. Now, it has been a delight to witness the evolution of this summit, and we continue to have a lineup of women from all over the continent and the world who will share their thoughts and opinions over the next 2 days. And this is quite pertinent because if we think about how leadership has changed through the global pandemic, how influences in terms of gender parity, and of course moving the needle forward in really trying to drive equality through various genders, it's become even more important for us to have these conversations in terms of what we can anticipate for today. But speaking of today's program and the excitement that allures us, Fifi, I understand we've got a phenomenal lineup of panels where we'll be engaging in several topics of discussion that speak to leadership. One being agility that you'll be managing, I understand?
Exactly. I'm certainly looking forward to that conversation, speaking with high-powered executives in the C-suite to find out exactly how they have responded to a crisis that demanded them to think really quickly in terms of pivoting their organizations to adapt to this new normal, as it were. But of course, Gugu, it's not only the female C-suite that we're going to be speaking with in their high-powered 6-inch hills, if I say, the women who are breaking through those glass ceilings and continue to break down stereotypes. It's also the very brave and the bold entrepreneurs who too have had a very big responsibility to ensure that their organizations are future fit. You'll know that a lot of small businesses were amongst the hardest hit during this pandemic, Gugu, and I'm really looking forward to learning from all the entrepreneurs and hearing their story as to exactly how they survived what has been trying times.
Well, just a reminder that it's no coincidence that the Leading Women Summit is brought to you today, the 8th of March, which does mark International Women's Day, a day which is celebrated the world over and speaks to the agenda of really trying to move forward in terms of seeking gender parity. As we know, the theme specifically for this year is centered around women in leadership and ensuring that they are able to achieve an equal future in a COVID-19 world. Now, we continue to celebrate the tremendous efforts that have been made by men, women, and girls across the globe in terms of shaping their future. But as we know, a lot more needs to be done, specifically on the back of the pandemic, which has exacerbated a lot of the challenges that currently exist. But Fifi, I'm quite excited to understand what exactly we can anticipate more of here today. So shall we take a look perhaps at some of the highlights that we can anticipate today?
Let's do that, Google.
Let's certainly take a look at the Forbes Women Africa brand that has built up these thought leaders and take a look at conversations today.
We have a lot of good examples of women in leadership, so it lets you be comfortable in seeing yourself in that same position.
Girls to take up space. Nothing as important as taking up space in society and cementing yourself.
Including women in leadership positions needs to be a very deliberate effort.
Now, since the start of the Leading Women Summit at a relatively small event in Johannesburg, attended by an audience of 100 people at the time, the event has grown to over 1,000 attendees at the Durban event last year. And one woman has been behind the summit since. I'm very excited to know her and to work with her and to introduce her to you. So let's meet her now.
Renuka Methil is the managing editor of the award-winning Forbes Women Africa and Forbes Africa titles. With 24 years of experience in mainstream print media across several geographies and the emerging economies of Southeast Asia, India, the Middle East and Africa, she is particularly excited about the future of female entrepreneurship and leadership on the African continent.
At the start of a brand new decade, an invisible enemy entered our homes and our lives, leaving a trail of death, destruction, and disease. Entire economies crumbled under the weight of the giant wrecking ball that was COVID-19 as we faced a threat like no other in our lifetime. Our worlds turned upside down, we lost jobs, we lost loved ones, and we quickly realized that the old ways of doing things just won't work anymore. In what has been one of the most defining moments in history, all of humanity came together in a single year like never before to combat a powerful, vindictive, and all-pervasive pathogen, the ultimate disruptor of our times. 2020 was also about breaking the mold, and as vaccines were tested and scientists feverishly searched for an effective cure for COVID-19, in the backdrop, there was a larger, greater corroboration of global might emerging, of collective resolve and renaissance, with countries, companies, and communities coming together to fight a common enemy. Unlikely possibilities, partnerships, and collaborations came into existence between rulers and the opposition, between government and business, between economists and scientists, between science and religion, between friends and foes. In 2020, the words shared responsibility gained true traction and currency, and now more than ever before is the time for renewed entrepreneurial vigor, smart social re-engineering, and some extraordinary responses to the greatest human and health crisis of our time. Now more than ever before is the time to unravel and showcase the power of the collective. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure and privilege to address you today for the 6th annual Forbes Women Africa Leading Women Summit, held for the first time as a 2-day, fully virtual, social distanced summit. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome and thank our sponsors, MasterCard and WUMA. I would also like to welcome the Vice Chairman of the ABN Group and founder and publisher of Forbes Africa and Forbes Women Africa, Mr. Rakesh Vahi, who has been a catalyst for change and has always believed in the vision and power of this platform. He's joined today in the audience by his wife, Mrs. Saloni Vahi, and I would also like to thank Mr. Sid Vahi, the ABN Group's Executive Director, and Mrs. Roberta Naika, the Managing Director of the ABN Group. The theme for the summit this year is Africa Reloaded, the power of the collective, and just as the COVID-19 pandemic proved that no matter who we are, where we are, we're all in this together beyond boundaries and borders. The summit will highlight landmark conversations in a historic year in a world unified through technology and shared experiences. For 2 action-packed days, our worlds will merge as one as we cross multiple time zones together. We will visit the worlds inhabited by all of our speakers from the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Europe, China, the UAE, and from across every nook and corner of the African continent. And this diversity of region and representation will be mirrored in the audience as well. The summit is also a nod to each one of you watching from around the world, the formidable CEOs, the professionals, and as also the entrepreneurs, leaders, and billionaires who will grace the covers of our magazines in the years to come. Exactly a year ago, on the 5th of March, on the eve of the 5th edition of the Forbes Women Africa Leading Women Summit that was held as a real-life, in-person event in Durban, South Africa, news of South Africa's first coronavirus case broke. Yet, we had a ballroom packed with enthusiastic guests attending our summit titled The Ceiling Crashers 2.0 Power with Purpose. We didn't know then that if 2020 was a year of frailties and failures, it was also a year that would make heroes of ordinary men and women, those working on the front line and those blazing the path for others to follow. From behind our masks, ladies and gentlemen, we must look at them closely. These intrepid female entrepreneurs, the social justice champions, and even the medical warriors working tirelessly in the cold COVID wards of Africa. This summit in this virtual room today and tomorrow will bring together a unique collection of such individuals who have many a story to tell about how they held on to their belief systems and their tenacity in business and in life to overcome some of the greatest odds stacked against them. They're building, they're rebuilding the pathways of change and putting together an architecture for a new world order. These are the visionary thinkers, the doers, the problem solvers, and some of them the greatest fighters of our times, who have lived from despair to disaster and yet succeeded, as you will see when you encounter them over the next 2 days. Because when they win on an African countryside, somewhere on the continent, as the sun goes down, little girls will dream of becoming the women they see on this stage. With COVID-19, the inequality pandemic has further deepened the chasm and hampered years of progress, which is why, to the spectacular lineup of speakers at this summit today and tomorrow, I urge you that there is no better time than now to speak your truth. In its 6th year, the Leading Women Summit, which is a visual representation of the editorial and the magazines we put together, has always served the role of a connector, facilitating networking and collaborations that bring about positive change and impact. It's about connecting multiple generations with a coalition of ideas and uniting global names to harness their collective knowledge on the way forward. With all this uncertainty and the challenges we are faced with, be it climate change or the coronavirus, global cooperation and multilateralism are needed more than ever before today, where the true power of the collective is in also using our potential to look out for the hungry, the sick, the underprivileged, and the economically distressed. And who knows, this summit today may be the beginning of something new and beautiful in all our lives tomorrow. A warm welcome once again to all the delegates and the audience to the 2021 Forbes Women Africa Leading Women Summit. Thank you.
And that was the inimitable Renuka Methil, who's the managing editor of Forbes Women Africa. Now, for the 2nd year running, MasterCard is sponsoring this summit. Let's take a look to find out why the summit is so important for MasterCard and how the company is working towards turning adversity into advantage.
Anne Kens is the Executive Vice Chair of MasterCard. In her role as Vice Chair, Anne represents MasterCard around the world, focusing on inclusion, diversity and innovation. She plays the important role of Senior Ambassador and Executive Leader with a global remit and sits as part of the company's Global Management Committee. She is interviewed by CNBC Africa anchor Zinati Kuba.
Hello and welcome to the Forbes Women Africa Leading Women Summit 2021. My name is Zinati Kuma. Now, this summit is all about bringing together women from all walks of life to teach, inspire and change the world. And MasterCard is one of the partners that have made this event possible. And this is, of course, as the company is a big voice on the path to the inclusion of women in the economy. Now, joining me for a conversation on the path to women empowerment is Anne Cairns, the Executive Chair of MasterCard. You work with women and you hear stories of their struggles. From what you've seen, how has COVID-19 impacted the lives of women in Africa?
Oh, I think it's had an enormous impact so far, not just women in Africa, but everywhere in the world. I think it's really shown the gap between men and women on a global basis. And that gap is wider in places like Africa, where basically women, although they control a huge amount of the world's wealth, and it will be half the world's wealth in a couple of years, they only have access to bank accounts. About 65% of them have access to bank accounts. When you actually come to Africa, that drops to 37%. So you can see the problem, because if you're not part of the financial system, it's very difficult to influence business and everything that goes on around it.
You mentioned that women have been impacted more by COVID-19 more than men. Why is that?
Well, basically, it's because of the jobs that women do. If you look at the data from places like America, 70% of the jobs on the front line are done by women. There's many women in the healthcare sector, many women in the hospitality sector, and also women have a higher rate of part-time jobs compared to men, because they're trying to juggle their families and their work. And what happens in this kind of pandemic is those are the industries and those are the sectors that get hit the worst. And really, that's why women are suffering so much more.
And I mean, you talk about how, women have been impacted more negatively than men because of the industry and the industries in which they work. I mean, how do you change this? Is this a fundamental thing where we need to start thinking about which careers we push women to go into, or do we actually need to make a change within those industries so that they're on par with all the other industries where women have it better?
Well, I think we have to definitely do that. But I think the other thing is we need to look at women's lifetime earnings compared to men. And women just earn a very small proportion in some countries of lifetime earnings. And when you add it up around the world's economy is losing $172 trillion as a result of the disparity between earnings. And that could be that the women are in the right industries, but they're just paid at a different rate than men.
But I mean, and we've been talking and having conversations and writing reports about how women, do not earn as much as men do, even when they do the same jobs. Why are we not being heard?
I think that we need a societal change, and I think the change has to happen in the business world as well. At MasterCard, we went around the world and we looked at all of our jobs, and we made absolutely sure that we were paying women and men exactly the same amount for the same job, dollar for dollar. We do have a pay gap because there are more senior men in the company than women, but that pay gap is around about 8% on a global basis, and we publish that. And I think companies taking responsibility for their own people is a good start, but governments can mandate it too.
I'm just, interested in the pain points and the challenges that women, are also due to face even after COVID-19.
Well, I think that we've seen during COVID-19, during lockdown, the lion's share of looking after the kids has gone to the women. The women have been headmistresses of their own schools. So many women that I talk to have. And they've been very concerned for their families. And I think there will be a ripple effect after COVID-19 in that area. And there's a lot of data that shows that if women perform well in the business world, they tend to give back to their own communities, to their own families. They think about the environment. All of these things are amazingly important now, especially with things like climate change on the horizon. And yet women are being made redundant at a faster rate than men.
And what's weird to me is that, all these challenges that women face, a lot of people see it as a woman problem, as an us problem, not a problem of the whole world. How do we get men to be involved, on this path to inclusion?
Absolutely, you need the men involved. And apart from my day job at MasterCard, I'm the global chair of the 30% Club, which is also down in South Africa. And that club was set up to get more women at the top of companies on boards. And it was opened in Britain 11 years ago when we had less than 10% of women on boards. We now have 36% in the FTSE 100 and 34% in the FTSE 350. And it was really the men who stepped up and said, we know it's good for business. We know that we need to reflect the communities we serve. And we're going to help change this. And I think that is where you get the real engagement. Women can't do it themselves for women. They must engage men to help them because, quite frankly, men are still in many more powerful positions.
From what you are seeing, are those women that do get appointed to high positions, do they give other women behind them a chance?
Well, certainly from the women that I know on boards, and there's hundreds of them now in the UK and in other parts of the world, they are helping other women. And if I look at the 30% Club around the world, which is in places like Australia, Japan, Hong Kong, Middle East and Africa, South Africa, of course, UK, Canada, US, and recently in Mexico and Colombia, those women are stepping up and helping run the clubs because they can see that they must help other women. I think that, wasn't it Madeleine Albright said, there's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women.
Indeed. And I mean, we talk about adversity, but we must also look at, we must also look forward, look at the opportunities that are ahead of us. How do we turn, what are some of the opportunities, ideas, and tips that we can use to turn that adversity into advantage?
Well, first of all, if I look at your economy, you have many female entrepreneurs there, and yet women only get, 23%, only 23% of them get access to credit. And that's because they don't have the collateral to borrow from the banks. I think we have to come up with financial solutions that help women in their roles. And for example, MasterCard's been working with Unilever on a project called Jazaduka, where through Unilever's supply chain into the small shops, we're able to gather the data and show that the Dukas are really making quite a good business of it. And we present that data to the local banks and we get financing that way. I think we have to be very pragmatic about what we're doing for women.
And just lastly, Anne, the theme for this year's Leading Women Summit is Africa Reloaded, the power of the collective. And there's a saying that goes, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. Talk to me about the importance and the need for women to band together, to come together, to push the gender agenda forward.
Well, one of the things that we saw during COVID was that there were not enough women's voices out there in the media, in politics, in economics or in science. And a study done at King's College London on 150,000 articles found that women were only quoted 17% of the time in politics, 15% of the time in economics, and 5% of the time in science, although some of these women actually, have been inventing vaccines. So I think that a big step is actually getting women's voices out. And that's obviously what you're doing through the course of this conference. And the media plays an absolutely vital role. Women like to work together. Women are used to being in a society where they help each other. And I think if we can just amplify what they're saying and get it up to the highest levels in society, then we'll see a change.